thank you to Horseman for welcoming us here. I will say my kids all went to Horseman preschool / daycare, but my youngest one just turned 30, so it's a long time ago. Anyway, it was a great place then. So the one piece of business we have is to approve the minutes from our March 19th meeting, and can I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
In a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. And I think I'll just turn it over to,
I'm actually just gonna send it over here. I don't know, Chase, do you have any opening
You can send it
comments
to me, and then
first?
I'm gonna send
Yeah,
it
you're
to
sitting by the
Lucas.
computer, so I was gonna.
I'll give a little bit. I'll give a little bit.
and we may
also.
want to do introductions as well. I think maybe there's some people we don't all know. But.
We can go ahead and do introductions.
Okay, we'll start with you, Lucas, and go around.
Hello, Lucas Patajic, Executive Director of Secondary.
Eliza Proctor, Executive Director of Elementaries.
Kim Colvin, Board Secretary.
Good evening, everybody. Matt Degner, Superintendent.
Lisa Williams, board member.
John Bacon, Principal at City High. I'm Luke DeVries, Assistant Principal at City High.
I'm Emily Arbola, and I teach second grade here.
Dave Wilder, Elementary Principal here at Mayan.
Caitlin Glass, I'm the instructional coach here.
Ruthina Malone, Board Member.
Jane Finch, board member.
Charlie Eastham, board member.
Mitch Lingo, Board Member.
Sean Eystone, Board Member. Brady Shad from ICEA.
Chase Ramey, Deputy Superintendent.
Okay, and I'm Molly Abraham, board member. So now I'll
Sure.
turn it over to somebody.
Well, good evening. We're happy to be here for the start of our first Ed Committee of the year, and it's hard to believe that we are actually entering year 3 of our work around high reliability schools. We appreciate the board's ongoing support for that work, and so we're very excited to talk to you all about it and to start the year off with another presentation. We spent the last 2 years in level 1, and you heard us talk about level 2 last year, but really in earnest we're beginning that work. And we're happy to have Lucas and Eliza here to help lead that work for our schools to intro, and then of course joined by 2 great schools, Horace Mann and then our friends from City, to talk about the work that they're already doing. And after you hear about the great things they have done so far, you'll think that I'm lying to you, that we're only in the first year of year 2 or level 2, given all the great things that have already progressed. And so just thanks for giving us this opportunity. We love to highlight the great work that's going on in our buildings. And with that, I'll turn it over to Lucas.
I was hoping he wouldn't steal some of our thunder, so I appreciate it. Good evening, everybody. Appreciate the opportunity again to be able to speak here with you tonight, and more so the ability for our buildings to speak about their experience. We can talk to you about high-level stuff, but the work that's going on in the buildings is absolutely phenomenal, even though we're just beginning, as Chase said, level 2. So here's our objectives for tonight. Nothing too ambitious. We'll try to get through our little spiel as quick as we can so you guys can hear from the most important people here in just a little bit. When we have our new teachers into our district and our new administrators, we always like to onboard them with the language of HRS. So obviously our new staff members this year are coming in as we are in our 3rd year. But it's important enough where we take almost a couple hours with our new teachers, even though that's very sacred time with them, to make sure that they're getting the same message that our staff have received over the course of the last couple of years. This language, if it does not look familiar to you, was the elevator speech that all of our principals recorded 3 years ago when we started HRS. So we thought it was important enough that every administrator read the same message that they then gave out to their school and their stakeholder groups. So again, everybody's along the same page, and what you see here highlighted are those things that we hold really important with our buildings. Again, equitable outcomes for our kids, a sense of common language, and we'll talk through that, and then shared responsibility, and as you're going to see today, some autonomy that our buildings have along the journey in the process. If you're not familiar, if you don't remember the HRS 5 levels, we've recorded them below. Again, we're going to be focusing a lot on HRS level 2, but as we've told our buildings, even though we're focusing on level 2, that doesn't mean level 1 is in the rearview mirror. That's still a focus for our buildings and for our families and our students as well. One thing that we need to celebrate, and you can kind of see it over here, we celebrated as much as we could with our buildings, and I don't think everybody understands the amount of work that goes into every single one of our buildings. At the end of July, we're HRS level 1 certified, which is a huge deal. I mean, I think if we don't celebrate that enough, if we don't acknowledge that enough, we're not celebrating the hard work that went into it. And one thing that we always talk about is when buildings are level 1 certified, that doesn't mean they're perfect. That means they have a plan to prove and improve the work that they're doing. So I think that's, again, it's an amazing feat. I've been in districts where buildings were at their own speed to certify, and we set this as a goal where we had different checkpoints throughout the year last year to talk through, all right, what have you submitted, what's the work and the support that you need? And we helped them along the journey, but again, really the legwork went in by our building teams, the administrators, and anybody else that was part of that process. Again, it was phenomenal to be part of that journey and just to watch it from afar as they worked with the Marzano reps that went through the certification process with them. So again, it's amazing the fact that they are all, and we could say that all of our buildings are level 1 certified, and we met the deadline that we set out for ourselves.
I'm going to jump in just real quick. One thing that we learned that was we didn't know when we were embarking upon this HRS journey, it was actually unique that an entire district was doing this work and that we were doing it all together. Typically what we had learned when we've gone to those larger HRS summits was that it might be a district has the initiative, but buildings just go at their own pace, or some buildings choose to do it within their organization and others don't. And so we were excited that we were able to do something that Marzano hasn't really seen before and wasn't quite sure how it was going to all work out. And we've been able to do it and do it successfully.
And really the reason for that, we talked about common language. If we don't keep our buildings at somewhat at the same pace, it's really hard to have that common language. So that was really one of the initiatives that we put forward of why we've been on that timeline. Oh, there we are. We're all certified. Isn't that great?
That is great.
Wait for the standing ovation, but that's okay. Again, we use the language prove and improve quite a bit. So again, that's something we've emphasized with our administrators this year. We showed this timeline in multiple board settings as well as at committees like this. This is a living, breathing document, so we've actually made some tweaks and changes along the way. So we want to be continually mindful with our HRS lead planning team, that's part of our district leadership team, is that we're constantly revisiting this throughout the course of the year and of course throughout our journey. So we've made some continual revisions. As you can see, 2004-25 is when we're starting that level 2 work. Hopefully I can say simultaneity correctly, because we've talked through that quite a bit over the course of the years, that even though level 2 is the work of our buildings this year, we still have other people in the background that are starting the work of level 3. So we can't move forward if we don't have portions of our staff that are helping to push the work in the years ahead. So again, our focus this year, while we all become level 1 certified, is really starting that language and the learning around level 2, which you're going to hear from our buildings here shortly.
All right, so just as level 1 had 8 leading indicators, level 2 has 6 leading indicators that we will create, lagging indicators, or ways that we are proving those 6 things are occurring within our building. The main focus this year is on those ones that are highlighted in orange, 1.1, 1.2, 5, and 6. And that's that we're communicating a clear vision as to how instruction should be addressed in schools. And then support is provided for our teachers to continually enhance their pedagogical process. And we'll talk to you a little bit about something called deliberate practice. Teachers are provided with job-embedded professional development, and that teachers have opportunities to observe and discuss effective teaching. And we have our buildings here to talk a little bit about what they've done so far and what their plan is around that. One thing that you're probably going to hear, you'll hear a lot about within the coming years, and hopefully as we continue on this work, is something that we refer to as NASAT. And NASAT stands for the New Art and Science of Teaching, and that is the instructional framework that we have selected as a district as our way to ensure that we have effective teaching in every classroom. NASAT is, sorry, do we have?
Yeah. There you go.
Okay, NASAT is comprised of 43 elements in 10 design areas, which are those highlighted pieces within 3 categories of feedback, content, or context. And so what we are doing is working with all of our teaching staff so that we have a common way that we're talking about teaching. And so that when we say that we need to ensure that our students are engaged in learning, that there are, I think there's 9, there are 9 elements that teachers can look as categories of strategies that they may use to increase engagement within their classroom. And so this year is really focused on starting to internalize and learn this instructional model, to start thinking about, okay, if I'm going to work on increasing engagement, I might need to think about the physical movement within my classroom. So that would be element 25. So then we would look at all the different resources we have around element 25 about using physical movement. So what we've then done is each of our buildings have used data that they utilize within their building to start to figure out if we do these couple design areas really, really well and really focus on those things, what could we then, we call it putting back into the whirlwind, what could we put back into the whirlwind of the things that just happened? We know that we've got kids really engaged, so now we can start to tackle how we're giving kids feedback, how we are setting high expectations. And so that is what building teams have started to work on as their clear instructional vision for how instruction should be addressed in school settings. So that's something that our buildings are currently working on right now. 2.2 and 2.5 talk about how we're continuing to grow professionally as educators, which is a huge part of level 2. So as I mentioned before, the process of deliberate practice is a 6-step practice that our instructional coaches and our building principals are engaging with our teachers in, and this is just the beginning of it. So what we're starting with right now is hopefully going to look different over the next couple of years. But if you think about something that you're trying new, like I'm learning to play pickleball, okay, and I'm a super competitive person, and so learning something new is really hard for me because I just want to be good and want to beat my husband every single time. I have beat him, by the way. And so when you think about it, like the process of deliberate practice is I had to go and I had to learn the rules first, right? Because I was thinking that you could stand inside that kitchen, because I don't understand why anyone can't stand inside that kitchen and just slam the ball down. But I had to learn the rules. Then my backhand was really bad, so I had to practice the backhand or try different things, receive coaching, which was the people next to the court. I watched them to see what they were doing and figure it out and listen to their advice, and eventually I've gotten better and we won. I won the last game. We haven't played again since. And so the process of deliberate practice is just that, right? Exactly. I was like, I'm a champ. So the process of deliberate practice is that there's specific growth for an area. There's coaching that's provided by our instructional coaches, growing that hopefully to the point where colleagues can start to coach each other. Principals can be coaching in that process of deliberate practice around areas that educators are defining as their goals. Our CDP is our curriculum development plan, which is a plan that each of our teachers create at the beginning of the year and work towards the goals that they have established for themselves that align back to the building's instructional vision. So if your building's instructional vision was in a couple, like these 2 design areas, then you would think about what are some individual goals I have in those design areas, but maybe I'm already really good at that. So maybe there's another design area within those 3 categories that teachers are selecting and working on. And then comes in the support from our instructional coaches that are trained to help plan and reflect on the instructional practice. And so we've been doing a lot of work over the past 2 years with our principals and coaches to build their expertise and knowledge around the new art and science of teaching in the process of deliberate practice so that they can now go in and support the teachers as they begin that process. Professional development and learning is extremely critical for the success of that. So we've been working collectively to come up with what is kind of our whole group understanding that we need to have, and then how do we start to differentiate for some of our buildings that may be further along in the process, like the 2 that you're going to hear from today, or some that are just trying to figure out the infrastructure or logistics. And then our collaborative, please.
With the professional development, one of the things that I'm extremely proud of in our district the last couple of years is we've all started with the same information, the same slide deck at the beginning of the year. This means that every teacher in our district, every staff member is getting the same message. And last year we did level 1, introducing a lot of our collaborative teams with leading indicator 1.4. We did that same thing because we heard overwhelmingly positive feedback that everybody is getting the same message and that all of us are starting on a level playing field. We did that same work this year with level 2. And the expectation was that started during the pre-service before our students arrived, and that all that information, which gives the building some flexibility and freedom to tie in some of their own messaging, some of their own work, that all that work will be delivered to our entire staff by the end of this month.
Mm-hmm. And so then that last part is, again, as Lucas just alluded to, those collaborative teams that have been established and work towards proficiency, that they're, as a team, setting goals and supporting each other to reach those and starting to get into each other's classrooms, which is what we'll talk about with our building teams here in just a few minutes.
And just to whet your palate for a future meeting, we're going to be talking about our collaborative teams later this year and really listening and seeing some examples of some outstanding collaborative teams across our district. We're actually supposed to do that last spring, if I remember right, but April is one of the tornado days, so we had to cancel that, but that'll be coming down the road, hearing from some of our buildings as well as some of our teacher leaders as well.
Can never avoid the weather.
It was every Tuesday.
No matter what month
Doesn't matter
it
the
is.
season.
It was a Tuesday.
Exactly, it was. So I kind of talked about this already, but this is the instructional model that we have selected to utilize. And again, it is through Marzano, which is the same organization that publishes HRS. And so this has been one that we think it does align very well to other instructional models and strategies we have utilized. So I don't know if at any point prior to Lucas and I's time with you guys about SIOP, or Sheltered Instruction Observation Protocol, for our ELL students, we've created a crosswalk between SIOP and all the different strategies and how they align with the new art and science elements. We've looked at the Iowa teaching standards and the criteria of the 6 standards and the 42 teacher criteria to look for crosswalks and alignment there too. So that teachers are already doing a lot of these things, but they just don't know what it's called and why they're doing it. And so we just wanted to have that common language so that we know if we're trying to do these things, these are the different strategies and elements that we're doing to achieve that goal.
I don't want to steal your thunder later, but one of the things I'd like to
But he's going to anyway.
But he's going
Right,
to.
there he goes.
Because I have the deck memorized. We're not on this journey alone. We got a lot of resources from Marzano, and one of the things we've been able to do is to bring in some high-power professional development. And you might have heard us talk about bringing in a woman named Tina Bogren last year, and so this is kind of her wheelhouse along with employee wellness. And so she came at the beginning of last year, and she came back in the middle of last year for 2 days, spent one day with our leadership team and expanded teams from the district to really do a deep dive on those elements. And one of her mantras was 3-10-43 to talk about those areas and those elements inside NASOT. And so while we have a great leadership team here that's really been able to steward us through this process, we also have this national level of resources that we're able to call on to check our thinking, to check our understanding, to always make sure that we're having the latest ideas about what's going on. And so the Marzano Group's also been a great resource on this journey. They do the outside kind of scoring to make sure we're at the right level of how we certify, and then to do that checking for us along the way. So it's definitely something that we've made our own, but are also utilizing some outside partners to make sure that we continue to trend the right direction.
Perfect. All right, so the exciting stuff and why we have our fantastic educators here with us tonight is to talk about instruction rounds. And that was in direct alignment with that last indicator in level 2, was opportunities to observe and discuss effective teaching. And so instructional rounds are a practice where teachers go into another colleague's classroom with their own goal in mind. So if my goal as Eliza Proctor, teacher of 4th grade's goal is to increase engagement, and I'm trying to do that by using academic games, which is one of the elements. I'm going to go into Mr. Shutt's classroom, and I'm looking for how he's utilizing academic games in his classroom. Or maybe even broader, what strategies he's utilizing in order to engage his students. I am not judging Mr. Shutt's teaching. I'm not giving him feedback on his teaching. I'm not actually watching what he's teaching. I'm just watching how he does it. And then I'm going to take that back to, usually you go in with a couple educators and you reflect on this process. So what did I see during that lesson or during that time period that reaffirms something that I already do in my own classroom? Okay, well, I saw how he organized his students so that as soon as he said time for partner work, they weren't like darting and trying to find eyes. There was a process. They had a partner already established. Okay, that's something that I do. What do I observe that I'd like to know more about? So if I'm going to talk to him later, be like, hey, can you tell me a little bit about that strategy that you used? Where did you learn that? How might I do that in my classroom? And then what would I like to add to my own practice? And then the idea is to send a note of appreciation, not feedback, to the teachers, and then hope that you can continue to do that again. An instructional round can take as little as 7 or 8 minutes, right? Depending on what it is, what goal you're going in and looking at. If I'm looking at engagement, we better see our students engaged, and you should be able to see that if you're walking in there in a 2-minute snapshot. If I'm looking for a teacher giving student direct feedback, in that feedback, I might need to be in there for a little bit longer, just depending on what we're looking at. And so this is the process, and our goal this year is for every single one of our teachers. So when we say that, I want you to think like our elementary specials teachers, so like our librarians, our secondary business teachers, every teacher to engage in at least one instructional round this year. Individual buildings have set goals that are a little bit higher than that because they feel they have the capacity already, or they've created that infrastructure to start and do more than that. But as an entire system, our goal is that everybody would engage in one of those throughout this school year.
And part of that teacher's CDP, that thing that's unique to them, there's always been a section about peer review and working with others, whether it be a collaborative team or others that maybe teach the same grade level or same subject, is how can you help one another working as part of a team. So these instructional rounds are being used as an example of how they can use peer review as part of their annual CDP.
But, I'm sorry, so with the instructional rounds, does it have to be at the same level, same area, but
That is
they
an
go into?
awesome question, and we're actually going to give you a perfect example in just a few minutes of why no would be the answer. And so what we want to do is turn it over to our MAN team, Mr. Wilder, Ms. Arvola, and Ms. Glass, to talk a little bit about what they did last year and what they're planning on doing this year.
Sorry, those tabs, oh my God.
Yeah, that's causing me stress.
That's embarrassing.
Don't look. Yeah, it's impressive. Keep going, yeah.
Oh, he doesn't know which is which is the problem, so you have to watch him for 10 minutes.
That's what his computer was.
It's pretty close,
This is embarrassing.
I think we should give Lucas a little bit more work to do. He needs a
Great
couple more.
question, Mitch, because probably all of those
Let's get back on
documents.
track. Take it away.
Take it away, Gabe.
Go to the next
We're
slide.
supposed to say thank you, but not provide feedback.
So, some of this journey, I would say, was embarked upon starting last year, and so we were approached by, I want to say it was
Anna.
Yep, and she just sent out an email asking if we would be willing to host a group of secondary administrators and instructional coaches to come and just engage in that process. And so I was kind of like, are you wanting us to do anything special, or like what is there something you're wanting to see? I was very much like, no, we just would like to engage in this process. And so this is the schedule that I kind of drafted with Anna, and she put it in a nicer template that I sent her. And so these are the teachers that were willing to have groups come in and just observe some of those NASOT elements in practice. And so, teachers in MAN felt comfortable having the groups walk through so that they could learn that process. Not because I feel like we had some sort of accelerated implementation of these elements or what we were doing, but I think they were just very willing to have people come in their classrooms. Often our elementary teachers are also rapidly shifting gears and mixing strategies on a daily basis. So I think it also just kind of showcases the elements or nimbleness of our elementary teachers and the strategies that they're constantly pulling out at a moment's notice. The schedule seen here, again, are teachers who are willing to be available to host the experience. And teachers knew that groups were coming. It wasn't just like a surprise and they just showed up. So they had a little bit of notice. They did like reach out to me and ask if there was something that they needed to prepare special. I assured them that they did not. And Miss Arvola was one of those teachers that had a group come into her room. And as you'll see, she'll kind of showcase a little bit about what that experience was like for her.
And Gabe, I was there with our secondary group. We loaded 2 buses up. One went to Shimmick and one came here. And I was part of a group of administrators and coaches that went into a room. I have not been in an elementary school since I was an elementary student. And when I thought I wanted to be an elementary teacher, and I was like, I can't do this anymore. So like thinking through the amazing things, like as a secondary person seeing in an elementary classroom, like it was mind-blowing and it was an amazing experience. that, we're in a teacher's room for 6 or 7 minutes, and I think she did 6 or 7 transitions. And I left there, I'm like, holy cow, how does somebody do this the entire day for hours upon end? And I think it gave a different level of appreciation for our secondary people to see the work in the elementary rooms.
He's so right. They came back and they're like, "Oh my God, your people have to be so tired." I was like, "They are. They are tired. They are tired, but they keep coming back and nailing it day after day, every single day."
Sorry, I'm not.
All right, so Ms. Arbola, go ahead and take it
You were
away.
in my room, so I'm happy that it felt good when you left, 'cause that was the hope. So I teach second grade, as I said earlier, and when they came in, we just did like what we would normally do at that time, which in this case was like a whole group phonological awareness lesson from Super Kids. So you'll see up on the board, it's just like segmenting words so that we're separating sounds and whatnot. And so we always have a lot of fun with this. Last year especially, I wanted to focus, like my CDP was focused on engagement, like within the context category. And so one thing that we do is like you'll see when it says play, now break it into sounds, the kids like stand up and we hop out each sound and then check if there's any confusion, like re-go through the sounds together and whatnot. And so I try to make it as like inviting and cozy and fun as possible, and so that just happens to also align with a lot of those design elements as well. And so the kids like went up and hugged, I don't know, I had 30 kids last year, so it was a lot of fun, and they were very excited to see more people come into the room. And so I think like 3 of them immediately floated to give hugs and be like, "Who are you? Why are you here? I love you." But honestly, like I don't think that kids like are ever really bothered by people coming into the room, and I personally love it because like any feedback I can get, I'm always very happy about, even though in this case it's just like a cute note. I like love the cute notes, so it was great.
And the note was from Lucas, right? So we had to decipher.
Gabe had to read it to me because I had no idea what that said, but it was lovely. I appreciated it. But yeah, so I feel like just like with how teaching is now, kids are super used to people coming in and out of the room, and I don't know, I feel like the more the merrier. So
thank you.
Okay, so looking ahead to this year, so as a building, we've decided that we are still focusing in that context category, just to really ground our collective learning as a building. Something very special about MAN is just their willingness to engage in things like this, and they have been doing informal instructional rounds in my 4 years here. They're always trying to improve their teaching, add new strategies, talk to each other about how things are going, so this just gives us a formalized process to really put that in place. So we are currently gathering feedback from our staff around those design areas within the context column to see how we can tailor our professional development as a building this year. So we're again giving some common language with some of those specific elements that our building or teachers are interested in, so we are really giving them the tools to be successful. And I think that will also open up some opportunities for that instructional round of like they're going to be able to go and see one another putting those things into practice. The other piece, I put those questions up at the top that Eliza kind of touched on earlier, because our building leadership team took a look at these questions as we were thinking about how instructional rounds might look at MAN being a smaller building, how we might engage in some of this work. And so it's been decided that we definitely want to start with these questions so that we're all on the same page and giving our teachers something to reflect upon. But as we get going and are really tailoring to some of those element pieces, these questions might change for that reflection, and that's okay as long as it's that collective agreement that these are what we're looking for and what we want to reflect on when we're done in a classroom. So that's some of the things we're doing this year. Something else exciting that we've engaged in is I put our little mascots down there, so it's MAN and Shimmick. We've teamed up this year for our PLC conversations. We've tried probably something different every year in my time at MAN, and it's just never felt
It's gotten
that
better.
perfect, but like it's gotten closer to what a professional learning community should be. Like we've all been now trained and all that stuff, but we partnered with Shimmick because our teachers just get along very well, and we really wanted to alleviate that singleton barrier within our PLCs. So this year we are engaging in that, all grade levels, all teachers.
Every week.
And we're doing it via Zoom. We do have a couple teams that are meeting in person. They made that commitment to want to like meet after school and do that and switch buildings. But this has been a really cool opportunity to talk about instructional rounds because Shimmick has been a pilot school for the new math materials. So they are in year 3. So they have been really good resources for our teachers of like how to implement and things like that, but our teachers are chomping at the bit to go to Shimmick and watch these math lessons in action. And in turn, Shimmick teachers are excited to come here and see other curricular things happening as we're talking in PLCs and talking about how we do different things. So we're in the works of getting some dates set so we get like subs in classrooms to allow that to happen. So we're really excited, and I think we'll hit the more than one, but mostly because our teachers are just very excited.
Can I say, just to jump in, I would echo like what Louis said, watching elementary teachers
Yes.
teach is just like magic.
Yes.
I mean, and, yeah, you're just going like, oh my gosh, everything's a learning station, every transition's a learning opportunity, and so it is awesome. But I also love, so I don't want to lose, I'm sure we'll talk about it, but just what, Gabe and his team are doing and letting, the staff have choices. So they get to help pick some of this, and you really have a lot more ownership, and you feel, really good about like, okay, here's what we want to do as a community, and so, and that, because that's not always the case with PD in my experience in the district, and so I think that's awesome.
Yeah.
It's a lot more like empowering and motivating to be able to have the choice.
Yeah, and for instructional leaders too, like, hey, maybe just to say like, yeah, I want your feedback, I want to collaborate, that's really valuable, so good job.
And we've seen a lot of teachers then say, "Look, I can help plan a
Yeah,
professional
100%,
learning, or I'll run
yeah.
this session." And so we're starting to see our teachers, that we as administrators see as leaders, start to see themselves as leaders and lead some of that learning.
That is a great segue for City
You're
Eyes.
welcome.
Was that the last slide?
I think so.
That is fantastic. It's like you planned it. So I'm going to turn it over to John and Luke to talk through their experience this year.
All right, thanks everybody. Yes, just a quick, before we talk about our work this year with Level 2, just a reflection back on last year and our focus on Level 1 that is very much ongoing, really helped produce some wins for City High. There were 3 things that I'll highlight. First, we were very intentional. It really forced us to reflect on what we have in place and what else we need to put in place in terms of opportunities for staff, student, and family input in the process, just evaluating on an ongoing basis how things are going, and make sure that there are structures in place for those stakeholder groups to really participate in the management of the school. So we created a number of different, from staff listening posts to several different opportunities that we were intentional about increasing that opportunity for shared management of the school, essentially. It was really very positive. The other big part of Level 1 was the collaborative teams in the PLC process. We really took a major step forward in that regard last year, and that just helps create a culture of collaboration in the school. It helps bring consistency to the different teachers that are teaching the same course. So we had a lot of success with the PLC process, the collaborative teams, and I think that really helped prime the pump for what is coming next with the instructional rounds, because it did just increase that culture of collaboration, certainly at City High. And then the other thing is one of the tenets of Level 1 is celebrations and making sure that you're intentional about doing that. I think that's been a strength of City High, but we really doubled down and looked for every opportunity to celebrate each other and the good work that's happening, and we put a real focus on staff morale. And we took opportunities to ask teachers for their input on what we can do to continue to keep morale high. That's a goal that we have. We want City High to be just the most dynamic, vibrant, positive place that you could possibly work, and that's what we strive for. So we really did a number of different little things that I think really added up to an intentional focus on faculty morale. So those things were great wins that were all enhanced by our focus on Level 1 last year. And then while that was the main focus, we really also started, with one eye towards level 2. And so work was done during professional development time last year to get the staff familiar with the elements of the level 2 instructional framework. So we kind of started delving into that last year, and it really it took the form of faculty-led professional development that Luke will talk more about, but we used a format called EdCamp, which is really a teacher-led professional development where they're able to offer different sessions of featuring work that they're doing in their classroom that they're particularly proud of or something they feel they have to contribute, and then staff get to sign up. So you have volunteers that agree to present, and then the rest of the faculty members that sign up for which sessions they want to attend during our Thursday professional development time. So it's a really organic teachers helping teachers professional development process, and it was an awesome way to really start to bring that NASOT, New Art and Science of Teaching, to life at City High. So based on the work from last year, I think the pump was primed, and then we just really made a commitment to hit the ground running with level 2 this year. So starting with our very first faculty meeting, we delivered that presentation that Lucas referenced that will be delivered everywhere, but we made a choice to just lead with that and really make sure people understand that was going to be kind of the main focus. So we started with that, and we just went right into our instructional rounds process that Luke helped put a great structure in place that he'll share with you. And so we have one round of instruction, faculty-wide. Every single person in the building has participated in one round of instructional rounds. And the first focus was on rules and procedures, which we thought made a lot of sense. That's one of the 4 tenets of the context. So we thought that early in the year, every effective teacher really wants to make sure that they are establishing strong rules and procedures at the beginning of the school year that will help set the stage for success and serve that classroom well all year long. So with a focus on rules and procedures kind of as the look for going into classrooms during the instructional rounds, we embarked on this, and it was incredibly successful. It's just exceeded my every expectation. I was worried about it in terms of just I normally feel like you need to ease into that new school year and let's not put too much in. I just couldn't have been more pleased with the way people were excited to participate in this, and with the feedback that we got. It just exceeded my every expectation, and it's really, the bottom line is I'm sure this is true at all of our schools. It's certainly true at City High, and that is we just have a phenomenal faculty. We just have a truly world-class faculty. It's really, there are some really awesome people at that big high school, and there's also people that probably don't know each other's names, on a faculty of 125 people. So that's a slight exaggeration, but to do something like this and give an opportunity for people to get into each other's classrooms and start to learn from each other and see, the good work that's going on in some of the, vastly different programming that exists at a comprehensive high school was a really, really special learning opportunity. It definitely has brought, I think, the faculty closer together from just one round. We're really excited about the next round, which will occur in October with a focus on engagement. So Luke, that was just kind of an overview, but he's gonna go into it. I really want you to see what Luke put together, and that really I do want to give him a shout out, because I think the success of the first round was really due in large part to just the tremendous organization that Luke put into this. He really set the stage for success, so I'm glad he's going to get to show that to you now.
I'll probably repeat a couple of things. Go back to that first.
Sorry about that.
No, just last year we kind of set the tone for this. We knew that at level 1, safe, supportive, collaborative culture, we knew everybody would be on board with that. When you start talking about an effective teaching in every classroom, that gets a little more personal for the teachers. We always start every year during our back to school professional development with the teachers by doing 4 breakout sessions where we talk about our multi-tiered systems of support of academics, attendance, behavior, and mental health, and what we have in place to support that. And where teachers have a hard time coming up with our tier 1 interventions is under academics. And so we were able to put the NASOT framework after they listened to Tina Bogren in front of them and say, this is a menu for you for tier 1 interventions that you can use in your classroom. Maybe you're teaching, maybe you're stuck with a student. These are here for you. to use, and this is why we need an instructional framework to help support all of our staff doing that. So that helped them get on board with that. We dove into the year with our professional development, letting teachers kind of internalize this framework. We didn't dive into it too much, but that's where they said, I think I'm really good at Element 41. I'd like to do a session on it. So this is just a couple snapshots of the sessions that teachers offered, and we asked them to describe on that right-hand column there which element they'd actually be presenting on to their colleagues. So we really set the tone for learning from each other by doing that last year, which really helped us get into this year. So, feedback from our ed camps are just a couple snapshots up there. Some of the things teachers said about those. They were really excited, really loved learning from each other. They're more exciting to hear from than John or I talking, so they really enjoyed that. But then we used that culture that we established last year to really just dive into instructional rounds this year. So we started the year with all administrators, instructional coaches, teachers, and school counselors, asking them to participate in the rounds. Each group was a cross-curricular group, so it was a mix of teachers from different departments who shared the same common planning time. But prior to the week of instructional rounds, we went back to the NASOP framework, and I should have brought a copy of the book. But if in the copy of the book, when you look at each of these elements, it really dives in 2 or 3 pages of what these elements look like. For example, one of the elements is demonstrating withedness. And if we knew if we just asked teachers to walk into a classroom and say, "Did you see teacher demonstrating withedness?" They might not know what they were looking for. So we spent a building day really diving into these and looking at the resources and having teachers study what this would look like, so they knew what they were looking for in the classroom the following.
That's an oddly attractive one for people to pick on their CDPs. They're just like, oh, that's at least in the high school, it seems like, yeah, they want to do withedness.
Mm-hmm.
I did not think.
You're with it.
No, way too high of a hill.
Right.
So we jumped right in. We did PD on implementing rules and procedures and building relationships. We thought that starting the year that these are 2 of the elements that teachers should be focused on the first couple weeks of school. It's something that should be easy to see in the classrooms. We developed a schedule. I just took a snapshot of my spreadsheet that had 23 different groups. The gray at the bottom is the 3 teachers they saw this first round, and then they know which teachers they're going to the second round. The goal was for every teacher to hopefully hit all 4 core areas, elective, special ed, classroom, during the 6 classrooms that they visit. So the other thing with this is every teacher in the building will have been visited at least one time, and every teacher in the building is participating. So in the first round, we had almost 70 unique classrooms that were visited by a group of teachers. We went back and forth, do we let teachers volunteer for this or not? And we said if we're going to have a culture where everybody's going to participate and we're going to learn from each other, then we're all just going to dive in and we're going to do it. And I was a little nervous about presenting that to the staff, but it was very well received and everybody was excited. We didn't get any negative feedback about it. We have a second round planned in October where we dive more into engagement strategies and communicating high expectations for students. We're going to do a similar format where we teach the week prior to that and then get back in and look at those items. And then jumping ahead to the second half of the year, around the April time, we're going to start looking at content, some of the elements under content. We're going to do a third round of instructional rounds. So we're really excited about it. We've got some really positive feedback. I think the next slide is just some of the comments we asked our teachers to fill out, just a reflection form. And the first one there is, wow, why haven't we been doing this for years? Teachers are super excited about it. I think the only negative comment we got in the 85 responses, that wasn't even really negative, was took a little bit to get over the awkwardness of walking into a classroom. But that was in 85 responses, that's the only thing you can pick out as even slightly negative. So it's all positive from all of our staff, and they're excited to do it again.
Which, if you've ever given a survey in any type of profession, that's really uncommon to see. Not like a smart aleck comment here or there, or something that gets off of the purpose of what you were trying to do. And all the comments, I mean, it was not an easy thing to do, just to pick out a few.
Two other nice little things I want to highlight. One, teachers really took it upon themselves to want to thank the classrooms that they visited. So that was kind of a really positive byproduct of doing this. Was the teachers that did have their classroom visited were the recipients of just lots of different positive messages that were really meaningful, I think, from their colleagues. So I think that really lifted people. It was very, very nice. You know, the other thing was with the focus on rules and procedures being established, I think it definitely raised the bar on some of the procedures school-wide that we want to emphasize. Namely, one that comes to mind of interest to all of us is the cell phone usage, for example. We have a building-wide procedure there, a common language where every class is expected to begin in the same manner with secure your devices. And knowing that instructional rounds is happening and people are coming in, I think we're better than ever at the implementation of that common language. And really one of the positive takeaways of the first round of instructional rounds was just the great success with very, very few phones that were out, and how well, frankly, that procedure is working with true school-wide implementation of a procedure that is practiced at the beginning of the school year. So it's really been a positive, and I like how we're approaching that at City High, and it's working well for us. So.
Yeah, I got good feedback from the City High people, I will say, just from teacher to teacher to me, so, yeah, it's good. And it's hard to pull, I will say too, on the logistics of it, I'm just thinking like, oh my gosh.
If you need a spreadsheet done,
yeah,
you're going.
I mean, that's logistically, just to be able to lead it culturally, but then also logistically pull off, it's impressive. That's good. Yeah.
Well, what questions do you all have? Thank you to both of our buildings, but.
Yeah.
Yes.
I first, talk later, Rick. I think I've said this before in other education committee meetings. This is exactly the kind of things I would personally really like the community to hear about how you are going about making this one of the best educational districts in the country. From the content and tenor of communications I get, and other board members get from the community, they don't see this, and therefore I guess they don't believe it. And this is the truth of our district, and I would hope that we would find a way to communicate this more effectively. I mean, I'm just talking to board members now. We could have board meetings like this, basically, in this room. So we have to figure out how to record them in the video. And that could be what we do half of the year, something like that. It's fun to talk about financing, I know that. But that's not what's happening in the classroom. So I guess I'm asking fellow board members, maybe Matt, to do more to communicate what's happening here and in other education committee meetings to our public.
Maybe as an education showcase.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting thought, Charlie, right? When we think about, as much as we like to talk about buildings, buses, and budgets, the kind of the 3 Bs, that always seem like they end up at our board table in different ways, or that the community, will ask us to think about. I mean, like, this is the heart of what we do, right? And I think this is why most of our educators get into the profession to start with, right? Because they want to be excellent teachers in front of kids. They want to improve their craft. The part I think I'm the most proud of is just how embedded this has become, right? I don't, like Luke said, we don't hear people complaining about it, right? And I think it's because we finally have parts of our system that are working together. We don't have coordinators over here doing this thing that's separate from the coaches, from the classroom teacher, from what the principals are receiving PD on. There's a fabric that has it all connected, and it's all working towards the same effort with the same path and the same goal. So I do think people need to see that and need to be aware. I know sometimes when we get into the details about the elements and things like that, that maybe isn't exciting to follow or is easy to follow for people. But at the same time, it's the root of what an educator, what we actually want them spending their time on, right? And I think it also speaks to then our job as district leaders and not to speak for you guys, but as board members about how do we protect that, right? Like if we want our educators to be the best possible, this is the work we need them focused on, right? Not worrying about some of those other things that we spend our time on, and then are we doing enough to try to buffer that so that they can be the great professionals in the classroom every day? So I'll spend some time thinking about how we get into recurring fashion. We've had those HRS updates, where we provided stuff, but that's mostly hearing from our district team and not some of our building-based folks, which probably adds a level of credibility or power to it, right, when it comes from the people actually doing the work.
I think, Matt, too, one of the things we've also looked at for Ed Showcases every month is rather than us generating the topics, we've asked each building over the course of the next couple of years to sign up. And so this could be one particular thing that they discuss as part of their Ed Showcase as well.
Yep.
If you don't mind spending another evening after 6 o'clock doing your volunteer jobs.
I was just going to throw out that it's hard for me not to correlate this work to just my job out in industry or my history, not in a teaching environment. I think about the going and watching other people do their work and how much of a benefit that would be for the last several places I worked at, because everybody seems to think everybody else is doing a terrible job and they're awesome, right? Like, just to go out there and say, oh, no way, everybody's doing some great things and we all have things we could do better, right? I think you make both of those connections by doing that, and so I really feel like that's something that anybody could use, not just in a teaching setting. The other piece, and we talked about it earlier when you talked about like the common language part, and Eliza, I think you said is you may be doing it and you don't even know it because you don't know what to call it. And I really felt that one. My last job, we were purchased by an outside company, and they were bringing outsiders in and saying, you're not doing these things, because we didn't call it what they called it, but we were doing it, and it was really hard on the receiving end to have them come in and say, you're not doing it. And so I do wonder, was there anything like that happened where you're like, here's what we're calling it, we need to do these things, were people like, well, we are doing those things? Like, did that happen?
A little bit, and I wouldn't say like directly like that, Sean, but I think the piece that I think it actually kind of helped them feel a little bit like this was one less like additional thing, was like, hey, I'm looking at that. There are a lot of those things that I already do, but there are also things in there I don't know yet or I haven't tried yet. And so I think for them it felt relatable of like, okay, some of those things like, yep, I already do them, but I can also get better. That is the other thing about our educators and just this profession, is they're inclined to always get better. I think our educators, I think I heard Emily like make a little comment when you said people think, oh, I'm already doing it really, really well. We're the opposite in education. And we actually as teachers think we're not doing it very well and our neighbors doing it better, because we are like highly anxious people. That's like the prototype of an educator. And so I think for them it was like, instead of this being an additional thing that we're asking you to do this framework, there's already things that you're doing on there. Let's call it what that is and actually think about in that PLC process, when we are planning for our instruction with intentionality, which elements am I doing to actually engage my students? And so that's a part that is our next connection, is that level 1 and level 2 and where they intersect, is that we are selecting our instructional strategies with purpose and intentionality for a desired outcome. And so I think that's
powerful, Eliza. Like when you're in those collaborative teams and then you can name the strategy you use to share that with other people, and everybody understands instantly what you're talking about, rather than it was this unit, I did this specific thing. It's more if we have the common language. That's where the language becomes harder for us to quantify and even explain out sometimes. But when you're in those collaborative teams and can say, oh, that's a strategy for this, then I think the understanding just quickly goes to, okay, well, I can do that because I know what that means to me and how I implement that. So I think that's a key part for sure.
It's growth oriented too. I mean, I think it's the other thing that it's not evaluative. And so I think, you hear like what John and Luke were saying, and all the notes that people get, then it's like, okay, it's very supportive, that's the culture. So you don't feel like someone's coming in and saying you're not, doing these things like you're sort of describing, because you really are trying to improve as a culture in the school. And so I think that's another, because you could really, I mean, if you did it wrong. They really
Right,
could
you could
become
check
one.
off, oh, didn't do that.
Yeah, exactly. It becomes
Could
this
hurt you.
thing,
Yeah.
but that's where I think
Yeah.
the district's done a really, really good job of making sure that it is growth oriented and not inequality.
And to plan PD for 30 buildings, if we didn't have a common language, would be nearly impossible. Like, all right, we're talking about this. I know your building's referring to it as this, but here's what the other, like, it just makes it impossible to do it. And the fact that we're partnering up this entire year, elementary and secondary are doing the same PD in the mornings once a month.
Together.
Like, if you were to say that 2 years ago, I'd be like, you're crazy. But the fact that we're able to do that this year around the work of HRS is.
But we've always, I mean, what I think the power of that, of the having an instructional framework, is that it is a change. Like, we have not had one. So we were not naming things, and we were not able to do
Right.
those same thing. So that is the power. I mean, Molly,
Yes.
how long have you been in the district?
Oh, yes, I love this.
30, 40 years. Yeah,
When I
exactly.
read
It's
the
like,
news
my gosh, we
last
have
night.
not done this.
Sean, I was
38
also
years.
just gonna add, like when you were kind of mentioning like buy-in in a way. So like last year I had the instructional rounds, but I also mentioned like focusing my CDP on things, and then it also happened to be an observation year for me. And Eliza was like I assume I'm the worst at everything, and like sure maybe I like happen to do these things, but probably not well, because I think everyone who's a teacher is like wanting to get better, and that's part of why we do the job. But what I wanted to mention was Gabe, when he did my like post eval for my observation, he was like, he pulled out all of the elements that he saw, and he was like, no, this was actually like really good. And that's when I was like, oh, okay, like now, so now I like believe it, but it made it like really powerful to be
Just
like,
read my notes.
She
yeah,
can't.
but it's not, it's a nice note, but it's not like you did this, this, and this.
You can't read it.
So I'm like, yeah.
Yeah.
But that is like, for me, I think when I like, not necessarily like a mindset switch, but I was like, oh, like, okay, like I am doing these things and they were noticed, and apparently I'm doing them well, so that's great too. Yeah.
I think one of the positive things that's helped this be well received at City High is just that aspect of it that is affirming in nature, because there's a lot there, and I think most people are able to look at things that are stated on the framework, and they can see it in what they do, and they're able to, it's affirming. They're like, oh, I do that, and they feel good about that. And yet there's also other things where, it makes them more open to saying, well, here's how I could do that better, or here's some other things where I could do. But, you can find, like, for example, at City High, our buzzwords have long before HRS was a thing that we knew about at all. We focus on relationships and engaging instruction, and that's what we say is the DNA of City High School. That's what we want our identity to be. If you ask any faculty member at City High, what's City High all about, what do you stand for, they'll say relationships and engaging instruction, I guarantee it. And when we got HRS, that was 2 of the 4 things of context. So it's like we got 2 of these right, and so usually it feels good. You feel like we are on the right path here, and then it makes you very open, I think, to wanting to learn about the other aspects of this.
I like how this draws upon the collective intelligence, which is always higher than any individual intelligence, which is also sort of why we have a board. But and then also the consistency. So just if you've ever been a parent, you know how important consistency is for students. So I'm really curious about how that translates into is classroom management now better now that our students are experiencing this consistency, and how does that translate to the culture across the building? Have you seen any changes, or is it too soon?
No, I think the example I gave with cell phones is just one really positive example of that. I think the increased focus on, for example, we created a committee called Level 1 is called Safe and Orderly Schools, right? So we created, and we call the SOS team, Safe and Orderly Schools team. And that team is a faculty group that meets on a regular basis and just studies things going on in the building, kind of the nuts and bolts, how is the school functioning, and where do we need to make tweaks and improvements. And so through that SOS team is where really a lot of the tweaks were made to how we approach cell phones, and so a lot of teacher input, a lot of shared ownership over how we're going to do it, and we're seeing really good results. So I think the process has definitely resulted in noticeable improvements, and that's one example.
I think that consistency piece you mentioned, Jane, that was something we talked about early on with this, right? Like whether it was culture or consistency of how we talk about improving our practice, right? I mean, that's what takes the randomness out of it. And while we still want to, of course, have individual expression in our teachers' classrooms and how they approach things, I mean, there was no formal way to talk about instruction. Like Brady says, absence of an instructional framework, that was a constant roadblock we hit. Is like, how do we even talk about this to get better? You know, like we can all reflect on our own and we can all try to share that and go to our own strategies, but without a constant, or without some kind of a benchmark to say, this is what we're trying to do, or this is what we're shooting for, we, I think, saw a lot more variability in the system. And so while we're early on in this level 2 piece, I think you, like John had mentioned, you'd see some big improvements for the level 1 in terms of, okay, how do we respond when things don't go well? It's not that things aren't ever going to go wrong or that we're not going to have problems, but now we have a system to review those and try to put in a plan for improvement if things aren't meeting the standard we want.
Now, when we have our pep rallies at City High, they don't just say, oh, that's a waste of time. They say, that's great instructional practice. And when I rip my pants off, they say, that's an educational leader.
That, John, that's with it.
Yes, there you go.
I know it.
Maintaining a lively pace, too.
All these years. I knew it, Molly.
Yeah.
Tell Jerry, he was right.
Yeah.
He was right.
On that note. We just wanted to leave you with, Chase had mentioned that we've been working with some external partners as well with Marzano. This is Tina Bogren, and she very quickly became ICCSD's favorite consultant.
Yeah.
And she came and spoke to all of the staff last year at the very beginning of the year, and then spent a day also with our leadership teams at each of the buildings. Then she came back again in January and spent another day with our instructional teams, and then just with our core leadership team to talk about the new art and science and teaching and HRS. And so when we found out that all of our buildings were officially certified, Lucas and I were standing in the Denver airport coming home from a visit to the Dream Accelerator that you guys will hear about next month. We're like, we should email Tina and see if she would be willing to do something special for us. And so this is what she sent back. We shared this with the principals and wanted to show you, and I'm going to really hope that the sound is going to work.
I'm just ducking for people.
Hello, Iowa City School Leaders. Oh my goodness, this is Tina. I'm getting ready to head to the airport. I'm in another hotel room. But I just got a text from Lucas letting me know that every single one of your buildings is level 1 HRS certified, and I could not contain my excitement. So I jumped up and down for you. I am so excited for you, and I just wanted to pause and send this message of heartfelt congratulations. That is no small feat. And as you move into the craziness of the new school year, I just want to remind you to pause and celebrate this. I know you have so much to do. Your to-do lists are long, but man, this is worth the pause and the celebration. I'm just so proud of you. I am cheering so hard for you. Keep going. You're doing such amazing work. I am so honored that I got to be a small part of that. Feel me cheering for you as you move into the new school year. Congratulations.
Awesome. All right. I'm going to let Matt talk for a minute here about our next meeting.
Yeah, so I think our next meeting we're going to plan to do at the Center for Innovation, and we'll provide a Center for Innovation update, give you an update about what our leadership team has been doing in that regard, some of the idea for this vision for the student programming, and some next steps in that work. It'll probably include some conversation around even pathways and things that have cropped up in other parts of the district as we've had that team meeting. I think you'll hear us frame some of it that way. It's not that everything that comes out of that work is happening right at the center, that there's been other good opportunities we've been able to stand up because of those conversations. But we can plan on 4:30, whatever that October is.
October 15th.
The 15th at CFI that night. So.
Okay, thank you. All right. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.